Creative Mind, Exploring the Art of Thinking by Forrest Kinney. Crossing. In the video on binary thinking, we found that one of the many drawbacks of binary thinking was that this shade of gray is labeled light or white, just like this shade, even though it is much more like this shade of gray, which is labeled dark or black. Long ago, there was a leap in thinking that addressed this problem. Instead of making a simple binary distinction such as light and dark and stopping there, the same distinction was made again. So now light was distinguished as being light and dark, and so was dark. So now you end up with four states, which could be called light-light, dark-light, light-dark, and dark-dark. This is a more accurate way of labeling this reality. And of course, this could be done again to create 8 distinct states or labels, and again to create 16 distinct states or labels, and so on and so forth. This is essentially the way of thinking behind the binary number system that underlies all binary code used in all of our computing devices. Instead of calling these states dark and light, we can call them 1 and 0. And then each of these 8 states would have a separate address. 111 would mean the lightest state, while 000 the darkest, and so on. A striking early use of this way of thinking was in the I Ching, the oldest of the Chinese classic texts, thought to be around 3,000 years old. The 8 states shown here are like the 8 states we just saw, but here the broken lines are like 0 and the solid lines are like 1. These basic 8 states were combined with each other to create 64 hexagrams that represent the states of change in the universe. Here's a manuscript that was sent to the mathematician Leibniz by a Jesuit priest staying in China. Leibniz, among other things, invented calculus independently of Isaac Newton. So what do we call this kind of binary thinking in which we keep making more distinctions? I call it crossing, because we begin by taking a distinction such as dark and light, and then we cross it with the same distinction to create 4 distinct states. And you can continue crossing as much as needed. This deceptively simple technique can transform simple binary thinking into something much more subtle and accurate, and help us represent and deal with the complexities of reality. Let's practice this technique in various everyday situations, since practice makes permanent. The other day I was talking with a friend who needed to get another car, but she couldn't decide between getting a new expensive car or a cheap used one. I could tell she was thinking of a new car as something pristine, a vehicle that had only known the inside of a showroom and never a road. And used, that seemed to mean a car that was only a few miles away from a junkyard. So I shared my experiences, emphasizing how there are new cars, but also new cars that are only slightly used and are often a great deal. And yes, there are cheap used cars, but also used cars that have a lot of miles but have been very well cared for. It was binary thinking that got her stuck in a mental traffic jam, and by using crossing, I not only helped double her options, but conveyed the idea that there is a spectrum of many options between new and used. Life, like the stock market, has its ups and downs. We tend to notice the downward slides and not recognize them as part of an upward trend, but tend to see them as part of a larger downward trend. By crossing up and down, we quickly see that down in a time of down is not the same as down in a time of up. We often feel down because our thinking doesn't represent the bigger picture. Okay, suppose you decide to give up foods made mostly of sugar and food coloring, and also greasy fried foods and foods with weird additives, and instead eat healthy foods with lots of fresh raw fruits and vegetables. So the distinction of junk food and health food becomes important to you. So you go to the local organic health food store, and there you see potato chips. You had thought they were junk food, but the chips in this store are made of organic potatoes and even carotene-heavy sweet potatoes, sea salt, and they're fried in a heart-healthy oil. A bowl of chips sounds good. So are potato chips health food, or are they junk food and off limits? Here again, the technique of crossing can help us break out of binary thinking. We realize there is health food that is super healthy and health food that is more like junk food. And there's junk food that has hardly any nutritional value and junk food that has some. So we can step out of binary thinking and see that the chips can be seen as healthy and junky at the same time. The important thing here is not whether you use your thinking to justify the potato chips or reject them, but that you have a way of thinking that helps you have more creative options. Arguments. The technique of crossing can help us understand and end a lot of them. While seals argue mostly about territory and fish, we human beings spend a lot of time arguing about money. Suppose the wife says to the husband, "You are burning through money. We need to save more and spend less." He says he's spending less than before and saving more, and so they're caught in a binary thinking kind of argument. They get out of the argument when they realize that both are right. He is right that he's saving more than before and spending less. But the wife is right that despite this, they're still spending more than they're saving. She wants to be saving and spending in a context of saving more than spending. Crossing provides a way to see that they're not on the same level and not talking about the same things, and so the argument can end and end productively. Parents often argue about how much or little to discipline a child, or that adorable family pet. Parent A argues that Parent B is too strict, while Parent B argues that Parent A is too lenient. Back and forth they go. Until Parent B says, "Okay, I understand your need to be strict, but can you not be so strict, but strict in a more relaxed way?" And so they meet more in the middle, a middle not allowed by binary thinking, but allowed by crossing. Crossing also helps when trying to make a decision. For example, the other day I was talking about political candidates with a friend, and he said, "The lesser of two evils is still an evil." This idea could apply to many things. With simple binary thinking, we look at two options and choose one. But with the technique of crossing, we see that our choice might be in the context of a greater choice, and see that the better of the worse is still worse than even the worst of the better. So far, we've been crossing light and dark with light and dark, or 0 and 1 with 0 and 1. But there's another way to do crossing, and that is when we take a distinction such as hot and cold and cross it with a different distinction such as wet and dry to create 4 distinct states. This way of thinking gives us many new options and many new powers, something we will explore in Crossing Part 2.